Richard mempersembahkan sebuah pandangan alternatif dan tepat pada masanya dari salah satu zon konflik yang paling kurang diperkatakan di dunia. Ia adalah sebuah wilayah yang jarang didendangkan, terletak di perbatasan paling hujung di bawah naungan kerajaan Thailand. Richard merupakan seorang jurugambar dan penulis yang terkenal dengan pengalaman profesionalnya selama 15 tahun. Asia Tenggara merupakan rantau kegemaran beliau. Richard adalah seorang penglipu lara. Karya beliau memberi tumpuan kepada penerokaan kisah-kisah yang sering tidak diambil perhatian oleh media arus perdana. Beliau umumnya berminat dengan isu-isu sosial, terutamanya berkaitan dengan ketegangan etnik dan kaum, identiti dan sempadan, serta isu-isu yang melibatkan pemeliharaan dan alam sekitar. Richard telah menyiapkan tugasan peringkat antarabangsanya untuk majalah The Guardian, The Times, The Independent, The New York Times, The Washington Post, Newsweek dan Time. Beliau juga pernah bekerja untuk para pelanggan korporat dan komersial seperti Johnson & Johnson, Mott MacDonald, Salini Impregilo, Ericsson dan Lafarge. Beliau pernah menetap di Indonesia, Thailand dan Afrika Selatan. Pengalaman ini telah membuatkan beliau menjadi penutur bahasa Indonesia dan bahasa Melayu yang fasih. Buat masa ini beliau menetap di Malaysia bersama-sama dengan seorang isteri, saya rasa ada di depan ni, dan 7 ekor kucing. Terima kasih. Saya persilakan, please welcome Richard.
Terima kasih, Encik Izzuddin, for a very, very warm welcome. It's very, very nice to be here at the Penang Institute. It's a very special place that I did not know existed until I was invited to come here a month ago in Chiang Mai when I had an exhibition. And this evening I would like to speak a little bit, introduce myself quickly, and then we will look at some pictures about a long-term project that I've been working on. I'm a professional photographer with a background in news and photojournalism, and I'm currently based in Kuala Lumpur, where I've been living for the past 5 years with my wife. And through my background of news photography, I started to develop an interest in photojournalism. Some years ago, I was very, very fascinated with the concept of being able to tell a story with still images, single still images that were connected in a sequence. And I found this, I'm not a huge fan of photography itself, but I found that through photojournalism I could have a voice, my own voice, and I found that very, very nice. So I decided to move away from pure news photography and pursue reportage photography some years ago. And the idea of doing something in Thailand's deep south, in the 3 southern provinces, had first come into my mind when I was living in Bangkok. I'd just left Malaysia and I'd moved to Bangkok. And I was working there doing news photography and daily assignments. And I had seen things on the news. This was around 2006, 2004, 5, sorry. So this was after the Crusade incidents. And I'd seen a few things on the news, just some sound bites flashing up. So it made me very curious what this could be, but nothing very in-depth. And of course, in the Thai media, they like to sensationalize things very, very much. So it was, very dramatic, and then 30 seconds later it was over. And I just felt there must be more to this. So I started to research about southern Thailand. And I found myself drawn to it for several reasons. The first reason is I'm fascinated with borders. I'm really, really interested in the idea of a border, the history of a border, what a border might mean for one set of people as compared to another set of people. Because it can be very, very different, it can be very ambiguous, it can be very fluid. There's a lot of push and pull with a border. So these kind of ideas and concepts interest me. Also the fact that I'd lived in Malaysia before, I found it interesting. Also that there was an ethnic Malay population living there that was in a majority, in a huge majority, compared to the Buddhist majority of the country. That also interested me. And as I started to research a little bit what was happening in southern Thailand, I very quickly got the idea that at that time, which was early 2006, in southern Thailand, it was the third largest insurgency in the world, after Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was actually shocked to hear this. At first I didn't believe it, so I did more research and I got similar facts back and statistics. And that really, really shocked me. So that got my curiosity really, really, really going. And the other thing that I was shocked about was that there wasn't any coverage, really. I couldn't pull off the internet. I couldn't find in-depth reportage that had been done. I could go back and look at stuff on the TV that I'd seen, very sensationalist kind of reporting about southern Thailand. So I was very, very surprised that there wasn't anything very in-depth. And because of that, I decided to ask my photographer friends, my journalist friends, have you been there? What's your knowledge? I contacted friends that I had here in Malaysia, and the knowledge that I got back at that time was very, very shallow, very just on the surface. Oh, we've been there, but we don't know much about it. So this got my curious even more. There must be something more going on here than and I was also very surprised that the level in Malaysia at that time wasn't, because it's so close, and I hoped that I could have met an expert or a journalist that had spent a lot of time there, but I simply couldn't find one. So I decided to go down from Bangkok on my own steam and my own finances and to explore. And I spent about a year and a half taking small trips from Bangkok, going back down to the south, coming back, and within that year and a half I basically got nowhere. And my knowledge of this story hadn't grown any more. I didn't feel that I had a greater understanding of what was happening in southern Thailand. So it was a very, very difficult time and very frustrating time. And I often felt like giving up, but I kept going, and a very, very good friend of mine introduced me to a local photographer. And he didn't speak much English, I didn't speak much Thai, but we could kind of converse to each other with a little bit of Malay here and there. And that was the tractability that I needed to start moving forward with this story. And I found that once I got a really good traction with a contact down there, things started really happening. And I found myself, as a total outsider, being able to pull back all of these very, very subtle layers that make up the Deep South. It's a very, very complicated story that's made up of many, many layers. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit today. But what I would also like to do is to show a few key pictures from my book, Kingdom's Edge, that I feel very strongly about and that are very important to have in the book, because they come back to these things that I was talking about regarding layers. So that's very, very important to me. And also, the story is a very, very slow-moving story in southern Thailand. And it's a story that, again, even now, all of these years later, I'm so surprised at the kind of disconnect that people in Kuala Lumpur sometimes have with what's happening in southern Thailand. And also, as we're here in Georgetown now, it's very close by. It's not far, it's very, very close by. And this is something that was so important with producing this book. I wanted to have something tangible that I could show and start a discussion. So we'll look at some pictures, and then we can, I'll talk a little bit more about the technicalities of the book, and not too boring, I hope. So, maybe some small technical things there. And I had this photography book has taken me 8 years to photograph. So the photographs in the book are a collection of spanning 8 years of pure work, and then 1 year to actually construct the book itself, to design it, to edit the pictures down, to get the essays written, to get the captions done, to get it printed. So creatively, I was kind of out of the picture a little bit. I wasn't able to do too much creative work because, you know, constructing a book, there's so much technicality that you've got to throw in to producing something like this. So are we? Yay. Thank you so much. Okay, this first image, this is, I don't know if any of you have been to southern Thailand or spent time there or traveled. Excellent, to Patani and things. Great. This is a statue of King Rama V. Yep. And he's a very, very important figure in the history of southern Thailand because he was a key signatory in the Anglo-Siamese Agreement of 1909, which basically, between the British and the then Siamese, drew up the border that we see today, which some can argue is the sort of cause of all the resentment that we see in southern Thailand right now. And this picture, of course, I'd seen this statue many, many times in all of my travels and journeys in Patani and the other places. And it's a very, very important symbol of the Thai state. But for myself as a photographer, I'd been looking at ways in which I could find something tangible which I could connect with old Siamese Thailand and modern-day Thailand, some kind of symbol. So I'd been looking around for maybe old go-downs in Patani or warehouses or old working port areas. And I've of course, seen this many, many times. And this statue and this historical person are so important. So I decided to include this in my book simply because of what a strong symbol of the Thai state it is in southern Thailand. It's very important for Siamese Thais. It's very important. They'll put flowers and offerings. They even have aerobics classes in that area in the evening. So it's a focal point for the city. And also, Patani is a city where it's a very, very, the city itself has a very strong Thai influence. Much more so, I think, than Narathiwat or Yala, for example. So I really wanted to include this in my book, and you know, it's an image that some people might find a little bit mundane or doesn't have a shock value or things. But as I started moving forward with this book, and I made a conscious decision to do this project as a book, my vision on images changed. You know, it changed completely about what might be important and what might be less important. So, you know, making a conscious decision to finish this project in something tangible changed my view on the Thai Deep South and my images. These gentlemen here are, again, a very important symbol of the conflict and a very important part in why there is a conflict in the South. These guys here are an armed militia. And they are called a Tahan Pran. And Tahan Pran are a militia force that are trained and armed by the Thai state. And when I first started shooting in the three southern provinces in sort of 2006, I didn't see these guys around so often. I would see them maybe outside a camp or maybe manning a roadblock occasionally, but I often saw the Thai military were very much at the front of what you would see on the streets there. But then over the years, that changed. And I started seeing these guys more and more in really key roles, which interested me very much, you know, as to why I would see them more often, why I would see Thai soldiers less and less. So I decided that I would try and spend a week, or as long as I could, to document their training, their recruiting, maybe go on a patrol with them. And it was a very, very interesting experience for me to document all of this because the training was very, very brutal. And people could just literally walk in off the street to a camp and throw their bags down and they would be accepted in. They'd get their head shaved and they would join. And within a few days, they had a black uniform and an AK-47. And that was also something that I hadn't seen anywhere else, really, that level of how quickly that sort of happened. And they're a really tough-looking bunch, I think you can see from the picture. which was also concerning for me. And it kind of felt like that perhaps, you know, they'd been let out maybe, you know, from the prison, and someone had said, we've got a job if you like it. And that was, I really had that feeling about them. And I saw them more and more on patrols, on the streets, and it seemed to me that perhaps in terms of an accountability, the Thai security apparatus were perhaps using these guys to do things that maybe they might like to see a little bit less accountability for. So that was very interesting. And of course now I see them all the time, and the AK-47s are gone, and they've got the latest equipment from the US, and you see them a lot more than you do regular Thai forces actually. And also there's a lot of, when I speak to my friends in villages and things that I stay, there's a lot of animosity from local people towards these Tahan Pram, because they're quite harsh in how they deal with people. There have been some shootings that may or may not have involved Tahan Pran. So there's been quite a lot of animosity with people that I've spoken to towards them. And these guys are also, one of the big key difference, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, is that these guys are all recruited from southern Thailand. So they're from there, they speak the local language, whereas Thai army will be conscripts from another part of Thailand completely, and they won't speak the local Malay dialect, so it'll be very, very difficult for the soldiers to assimilate or make any kind of connection with the local population. Whereas the idea with these guys is that they would be able to do that. This is also a very, very interesting thing in southern Thailand, a very interesting aesthetic. To see Buddhist monks on patrol with Thai soldiers was something I'd never heard of or seen before. I thought perhaps in Sri Lanka, I'm another place that we might see this, but I once saw a TV crew, I saw a documentary where a TV crew had followed the soldiers with the monks, and I'd never seen anything like it. So I think it was one of the pivotal moments where I thought I should really go down to the deep south and explore this more. And then when I started to explore this more about why the soldiers accompanied them, I'd found out that some Buddhist monks had been shot, or they'd been blown up in roadside bombs, and that some had even been beheaded. And this, I couldn't even put a visual picture in my mind of that Buddhist monks would be attacked in this way, let alone even having been beheaded or anything like that. So, you know, again, it comes back to these layers. The more and more I went to the south and the deeper I got, the more layers that I pulled back, the more sort of fascinating it was. And I decided that I wanted to accompany some Buddhist monks on their morning arms collection with the Thai soldiers. So I was very luckily able to spend a week with an infantry battalion from Udon Thani province, who were basically based in a wat just outside of Patani city, and were guarding the Buddhist monks. Only 20 or so monks, including novice monks, staying there. And every morning they would go out on a patrol, and they would accompany them. First of all, they would go on foot and then into the Humphries. But I got permission from the army commander, and he said I could stay in the wat where they lived, and that I could accompany them in the morning. So I did that for about a week or so, and it was a really, really interesting and somewhat surreal experience to do that, because we left the army camp in the morning, and first of all in Humphries, and then we approached the outskirts of Patani city, and then we parked up the Humphries and we began on foot, and it was still dark. But as closer as we got to Patani city, the soldiers were checking for roadside bombs and booby traps, and I think that's one of the first times where I thought, phew, we really are in a very, very serious sort of conflict zone here. And then as we entered Patani city, it was that the sun had started to come up, and it was so quiet. I can't describe how quiet it was, and there were people just in front of their houses with their metal rice bowls and giving the monks food. And the only sound was the radios on the soldiers that they were carrying, crackling away and nervously looking around the road. So it was a very, very interesting experience, and I'm very, very happy that I was able to get this picture into the book, because I wasn't able to repeat this experience, even though I had very much hoped that I could return with the Buddhist monks and do some things, but I was not able to be accepted again and do this kind of thing. And there was a kind of a period of time in Thailand where, after the first coup in 2006, leading up to the second coup in 2010, I had a very, very good access with the Thai military establishment. I mean, if you look through the book, many of the pictures in that book wouldn't exist unless I had a full cooperation and a full acceptance with the Thai security apparatus. But all of that sort of stopped after the second coup. And, you know, even quite good contacts that I'd made in the Thai army or the Thai police were, no, you can't do anything with us anymore. So things changed very quickly after the second coup. So I'm very, very glad that I was able to get this picture, and that it was able to go into the book, because I think it's a really, really good image, and a really nice, not a good image, but it's visually, it says a lot about what's happening in southern Thailand, I think. There are some things that I look for when I'm shooting. Again, images that might be less obvious or maybe considered a little bit mundane by some people, but the symbolism is no less potent, I think. And again, this was just something an image that was in a tea shop where I used to go a lot when I was in Narathiwat town. Every morning I'd have my breakfast there, and I'd seen this on the wall. And I just photographed it as more of a record, really. And it's something that I don't often see in other parts of Thailand, with the image of the Kaaba and an Islamic prayer on the clock. And then, of course, pictures of His Majesty the King, which are slightly higher up on the wall than the other symbols. And once I'd seen this the first time, I became very aware of it. So whenever I would go to a tea shop or a restaurant, I would always look for these things. And I would try to document them in my daily routine as a photographer in the South. So I think it's important to have those kind of things. As my journey progressed, and I got further and further into the story of the South, I started to develop more of a methodology for working. So instead of, you know, running around trying to photograph everything I could in a shorter period of a time, I really started to slow down and look at closer detail about what was going on. And the methodology that I developed was, when I went to southern Thailand each time, I would work on a particular theme. And that theme could have to do with water, or it could be landscape, or it could be education. And education is a really, really crucial element in understanding the nature of the conflict in the Thai Deep South. Because through my body of work, what I've learned is that the conflict in the Deep South is one about identity. Identity is very, very important. History is very important. Cultural relevance is very important. And part of the problem of the conflict is, you know, the centralized education system. Everything in Thailand is centralized. And, you know, what might be relevant for youngsters in a school in Ayutthaya will not necessarily be relevant for youngsters in a school in Narathiwat, especially if they're ethnic Malay. The history won't be relevant to them. They'll be lacking in Islamic-based education. And also, if the family are poor, they'll not have a choice of where they can send their children. They'll have to go to a government school. And because of this perceived bias in education, the government schools have become symbols of the government, so the insurgents use those symbols as a weapon, basically. So they will attack government schools, they'll firebomb them, and they'll also shoot teachers in government schools, and there have been many, many, many situations where insurgents have walked straight into the classroom and shot dead the teacher in front of the children. And so there'll be cases where teachers are armed and trained by the Thai army, and they come to school under armed military protection. And I arrived at this school very, very early in the morning, and it had been burnt down by suspected insurgents the night before. And it's basically a school. The building was divided into two halves, and I'm standing in the other half. So I think that, I was absolutely shocked when I saw this. But, and they have, every morning in Thailand at 8 a.m., they'll raise the flag and play the national anthem. So they still continued with their daily routine. And what was really powerful for me was that the children, even though half their school was burnt down, the children accepted the other children into their classroom and made space for their comrades that have lost their classroom, and literally just got on with it, really. But this is happening so often. It's very, very important that this was photographed and documented. And it was a very, very interesting time, and it was very interesting to speak to the teachers about their situation. And honestly, I felt that, first of all, they're completely traumatized. It's a very, very traumatized population, but powerless to really do anything. These schools are supposed to be protected by the security forces, which they don't seem to do. They seem to leave at night and go back to their camp. And it's a very, very tricky situation all round, really. Continuing with education, it's a very, very important subject there, as I said. So I had wanted to photograph a more of a private school. I wanted to photograph a school schools that were privately funded, because if you have a family that has some money, they will always choose to send their children to a private Islamic school if they can, with the long-term goal of their children will come to study in Malaysia, which is very, very important for many, many people. This is a private Islamic school outside of Narathiwat town, and I introduced myself. A friend of mine introduced me to the headmaster, and he said I could spend the whole day there and photograph whatever I wanted. And this was the first photograph I got of the day, and I found it very interesting that the classroom is segregated like that, with the wooden board going from front to back. I hadn't seen that before, so I thought that was very, very interesting, and also that they're being taught by the same teacher, and the teacher was a woman. The teacher also told me that the girls do much better than the boys in the education system, that the boys generally won't finish school, whereas the girls generally will, with much better grades, and they'll go on usually and study here in Malaysia. So that was also very interesting for me. A very contrasting image to the previous one, but also quite important, because I kind of feel that this is almost a symbol of the Thai state in a way. It's a very, very subtle undertone to it. And when I found this, I honestly, I couldn't believe it. And I'd been away in the countryside photographing some things for about a week, and then my friend dropped me back at my hotel. And I saw next to the hotel was this booming agricultural fair. They were selling pickups and tractors and all kind of things. So I felt that I should go and curiously discover this. And the further I got into this fair and the further back that I went, the more salubrious it became. There were, it sort of went from pickups and tractors to beer tables and a beer tent and girls selling beer, to right at the back where this was going on, where these girls will sit above a bucket of water and men can throw, for 20 baht, can throw balls at that heart, and then they'll drop down into the bucket of water. Soaking wet, they climb out, lots of cheering and yelling, and they do it all over again. And it just felt so far removed from anything else that I'd seen around, and so completely out of place. I mean, perhaps in another part of Thailand, further up north, this would be a normal, but to find it in the middle of Patani city, after I'd been in a very different environment, it was again this sort of layers that you peel back when you take the time in a place to cover a story in depth. So it was very important that I put this in the book, because I think it speaks a lot about the contrasts in the Deep South and the conflict and the insurgency as well. These are Royal Thai Marines in Narathiwat town, and at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. every day in Thailand they play the national anthem. Whether it's a city or a train or wherever it is, people stop and come to attention. And that's what's happening here. The national anthem's coming out over the speakers, and they just suddenly stop. They were playing a game of football on this barren ground, and the national anthem came on, and I wasn't expecting it. And I just think it's such another bizarre contrast to the things that you see in the Thai Deep South, and it was a very, very important moment that fitted very well into the book, and I think it's a strong message about the situation in the South. This is the Thailand-Malaysia border. Between Sungai Golok and Rantau Panjang, and with the Golok River. And you can see it's a very open border, and locals can come and go as they please in daylight hours. I can't go across on that border. I tried, but the Thai security forces stopped me. So I can't cross into Malaysia from this border. And to me, this was such a fascinating area. I spent a lot of time just walking up and down this in Sungai Golok. I really, really enjoy it, because you'll see families waving to each other, and there seems to be a lot of people that, even though they're Thai citizens, they'll have very, very close relatives living just across the river. So some of them actually will have a dual nationality, so they come and go quite freely, quite openly. And there'll be a lot of smuggling going on as well, right under the noses of the security forces. Although I think it's been stopped now, but it just shows how close the ties are between Thailand and Malaysia. It's so close, and it's so similar. And it's very, very important that that's recognized, because the history is not very long. And they're very close culturally, and I think that's very, very important that is shown. And this again is at the border, a little bit further away from where I was before. And this is the smuggling that's going on the border, because there's a lot of smuggling happening right under the noses of the security forces. It seemed to be from Malaysia, lots of petrol coming into Thailand. And then going the other way, it seemed to be lots of rice, lots of cookies, and lots of nappies. I'm not sure why it's diapers. I'm not really sure about that. So. Well, that's much further up. Patulong is much further up. It's just north of Songkhla province. But it's not in the conflict zone. So mostly I focused on Narathiwat, Patani, and Yala, with Songkhla just a little bit. Because I focused quite a lot on the train, and that train runs from Hat Yai, which starts in Songkhla province. And the true definition of the conflict zone does actually begin in Songkhla province. So those were the three main provinces, with Songkhla a little bit. So those were the areas that I focused on, leading up, right nudging onto the Thai border and Malaysian border. But I believe this has been stopped now. I think Prime Minister Najib signed a memorandum of understanding with Thailand that they were going to do something about this. I'm not sure how long it will last, but the last time I was there, this was not happening, and there were a lot of Thai soldiers on Thai side and a lot of Malaysian soldiers on the Malaysian side. And they were really checking people who was coming and going, which I'd never seen before, which was quite interesting. I also have heard rumors that they're going to build a wall on the Thai side of the border. I also understand that a memorandum of understanding has been signed, but I've not heard anything beyond that. I really don't know how they're going to do that, or who's going to pay for it. So, one of the things that was so important in southern Thailand is to show that it's not just all about war and conflict and division and polarization. And I felt that with this image, it was so important to include it into the body of work, because I feel it's such a warm image and a kind image, and it was just so lovely to spend time with this family. I know them quite well, and you know I was totally accepted with them, and it's just a lovely image, and warm, and no conflict and no polarization. And I also felt that with this image, it was kind of a changing time for me, where I could almost immerse myself in southern Thailand and photograph anything that I wanted, really. So I really wanted to look beyond just the conflict and include lovely warm images like this, because it's so important to do that, because I think with the media things can become very one-dimensional, particularly with the mainstream media, and also the way Malaysia and Thailand cover this conflict is very different. Thailand is very sensationalist, and you know, lots of shooting and explosions and dramatic music, whereas in Malaysia they kind of focus more on the victims, which is very, very interesting as well. These are menorah performers, actually from Patallong, as the gentleman suggested, and they travel around. They're sort of traveling troupe, and they travel around southern Thailand performing at festivals. And this particular festival is very, very important culturally. This is a very important festival for the ethnic Chinese that live in southern Thailand, in Saiburi town. And a friend of mine invited me to attend this festival last year. And it was really quite something. It was lots of fireworks and carrying statues and throwing fireworks at each other, and it was a really, really fascinating story. And there were quite quieter moments like this as well, which I really enjoyed to photograph. And during the festival, I sat down and spoke to a lot of ethnic Chinese from the south, and asked them, you know, what's their life like in southern Thailand, and what's life like in Saiburi. And they said, well, we don't live in Saiburi town anymore. We've all left. So I asked, why? What do you mean you've all left? I said, we only come back once a year to this festival, and at the same time we clean out our houses, we celebrate the festival, and then we all go back to Hat Yai, because that's where we all live now. We all live in Hat Yai, or we live in Songkhla. And this was very interesting for me. And of course it's because of the conflict, and you know they fear for their lives and they fear for their future. And I met some ethnic Chinese that had even exhumed the graves of their ancestors from the graveyard and taken the remains away, basically, to Hat Yai, and reburied them, and to Songkhla as well, which was very, very interesting. And I'd never heard of that elsewhere, that people were doing that. This young man, his name is Karya, and Karya was 24 years old, and he was a deputy village headman in Narathiwat province. And he was gunned down by suspected Islamic insurgents on his way home from a village meeting. And this is a very, very important image, one of the key images, I think, in the body of work. because, first of all, it's very, very rare that you can capture a moment like this in the Thai Deep South. It's very, very often that you can arrive at the aftermath of something like this and the Thai authorities will have cleaned it all up within 10 minutes. It's all cleaned away. You wouldn't even know that almost that there was anything had ever happened. And my friend and I were having tea in a small tea shop in a very rural area, and he has a police scanner in his car. So we got a call and there was a code, and he asked me if I wanted to go. So we went there immediately, and myself, my friend, these two policemen, and the two other policemen in their armored vehicle, which is where the light is coming from. It's actually a spotlight. We're the only people there. So we arrived very, very quickly. I very, very quickly walked up to this very traumatic situation and fired off a few frames. Spoke to the policeman and then waited for the rest of the authorities to arrive, and I went with Karya to the hospital. I accompanied the body back to the hospital, and when I arrived at the hospital, I met his father and his mother. And I introduced myself, and I told them what I had seen and what I had done, and what I was doing in southern Thailand and why I was there. And Karya's father immediately told my friend that he would like me to attend Karya's funeral the next morning. And that it's very, very important that I was there, and that I would join the family, that I would join the men, and that I would photograph this. So the next morning, I went to Karya's village in Narathiwat province, and I met his father again and his mother and also his siblings. And I was asked to photograph, they asked me that I would photograph the burial of their son. And this was the first time that I'd ever attended such an event in my life. I'd never been to a funeral before, or an Islamic funeral. So I was very, very nervous and, I didn't want to upset everybody. And so at first I was very cautious. I was very worried about getting close, coming closer. But Karya's family almost pushed me into that situation. They were very insistent that I came close and that I photographed everything, and that I would be able later on to show in these two pictures what happens to them every single day. Every single day. So it was really an honor for me and a privilege to be able to photograph both of these two things so close together, because in the 8 years that I've been photographing in southern Thailand, I've never been able to photograph something like that ever again. I've never arrived at the aftermath of a scene so quickly, and I never was able to photograph a funeral, even though I did ask. I was never granted access to that. So it's a very privilege for me to be there. This is a very different image. This came much later in the project, where I was looking for images that, even though they might be related to the conflict, they give a very, very different feeling. They give you get a very, very different feeling from this image. It's not really in your face. It's still very calm, but at the same time, it's an everyday reality. And this was when I was able to spend a week or so with another Tahan Pran unit. I had got special permission to go and stay with them. And this is a very, very remote militia camp right on the border with Malaysia, in Yala province. And rather than being cautious of Islamic insurgents, which they are, they're more interested in human traffickers, which has become much more of a problem now on that border than any kind of backwards-forwards traffic between Malaysia and Thailand regarding insurgents. So we went out on a morning patrol together, and we had a very interesting conversation about their experiences in tracking human traffickers that will be moving Rohingya from southern Thailand into Malaysia, always into Malaysia, never keeping them in southern Thailand, always moving them into northern Malaysia, which is quite interesting. And I believe now some very senior officials in the Thai army and police have been presumably prosecuted for involvement in this. So I think that's something else that needs to be kept a very, very close eye on in the Thailand-Malaysia border. I like this very, very much. I really like this. This came about after I had consciously made a decision to conclude my project in a book format. Again, I was looking at tangible symbols that I could relate perhaps old Siamese Thailand with modern Thailand or the border. And I came across this by chance. In the last year or so of this project, I'd been traveling into the conflict zone from Kuala Lumpur on my motorbike. So I'd been crossing the borders, the different border posts, and it's a very, very interesting way to travel because you're right in it. You know, you travel a little bit slower. You know, you can see the landscape of the country really closely, and it's really, really nice feeling. And I came across the border, and I drove through the no man's land, and I saw this sign. I thought, I have to have that in my book. It's really, really important. So on the way back from that trip, I deliberately stopped off at a shop, and I bought some drinks and some kueh and a few other things, and I gave them to the Malaysian soldiers, actually, that were sort of around in the no man's land, and asked if I could park up my bike and take some pictures. And you know, I took some pictures of them as well, and they were very happy that I took that. So that's a very, very important symbol, and I'm very, very happy that it was able to go into the book. Okay, that's the. I think in conclusion about my project and my own understanding of the conflict in southern Thailand, it's very much been a very long, slow learning process about what's happening there, and it's very much a conflict of culture and identity and historical recognition. But one of the things that has surprised me very, very much is the kind of disconnect that's felt in Malaysia between what's happening in southern Thailand. And even today, I'm still know a lot more people now than I did all those years ago. But still, I find that there's very much a disconnect, and that's very, very, very surprising to me. And maybe we can discuss that in a little bit about what you guys feel about that, because it's really shocked me because it's so close. So I hope you enjoyed looking at my pictures, and I love questions. I love them. So if you have questions.
Thank you very much, Richard, and for the wonderful presentation. So I think we just open the floor for discussions or rather Q&A. So any questions? Yeah.
Good evening.
I feel it interesting, your speech, but I understand that you have given using certain terminology, which to me I think is not very fair. Using the words insurgent. To my understanding, they are not insurgent. To me, they are separatists or they are liberation army, fighting for freedom.
It's not true. It's not true. People that I've spoken to in southern Thailand, and I've met insurgents, it's not necessarily a conflict of independence or freedom fighter. It's not like that. There are many, many different levels of what people would like as an outcome in this conflict. On one end of the scale, yes, for sure, there are people that want the Thai Buddhists and the Thai state out completely, and they want their own independent state called Patani, with Patani passports, all of that. But that's a very, very tiny minority, a very, very small amount of people that want that. Whereas the other end of the scale is people still want to be assimilated into this Thai state, but they want some form of autonomy. So they want a greater say in where the money from Bangkok is spent, where the education system becomes more culturally relevant to them. They want the Thai army out completely, or at least a withdrawal back to barracks. And at the moment in southern Thailand, you have 65,000 men at arms. That's massive. And I think that in the height of the Afghan war, the British only had 15,000 troops. So if you're talking about men at arms, that has to go. So you've got these basic things that people want. And with people that I've spoken to, the majority of the people are very happy to be part of the Thai state. And that includes some insurgent groups as well. So to have them as say, an independence or a freedom fighter, I'm not sure that I would agree, I would really agree with that.
Any more questions? No.
King Rama V. Chulalongkorn. Yep. King Chulalongkorn. And he was very much a progressive king for that time. And also a very, very important symbol in the Thai state in the south. And he was a key signatory with the British in 1909 that created the border we see today, or roughly.
To what degree you think that these people in southern Thailand are fighting for the freedoms? Do you think they want autonomy or freedom?
Majority of people, I believe, want autonomy. There is also a minority, particularly within the BRN insurgency group, that want total independence, like the Thais out completely, and their own country called Patani. But from what I understand, they're a minority.
Okay, maybe we can collect a few questions before you can answer it, right? Maybe one or two questions first from the floor.
Sure.
And then you can answer. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, that was very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I think the question on why we're so apathetic about the situation in southern Thailand is very interesting, especially for Malaysians, and especially in Penang here, where you might think that there's a little bit more Thai roots within the northern region. But in my experience working in conflict in the southern Thailand region, I think it's the same apathy that Bangkok has. So it's just for us, I feel, the lack of information. Unless you're within the issue or you're familiar with the area, for the longest time, Malaysians couldn't even access Thailand. I mean, of course, in the border, that's fine, but outside communities in the border, many people would know that, 3 deaths a day at least in the region. And so that's about 1,000 deaths a year. But we feel more affected for a bombing or a terrorist bombing in Europe. So that kind of emotional attachment is not there, although I see a little bit more attachment to Bangkok. So when there was some sort of bombings in Bangkok, it's just because I feel information and that relationship hasn't been built yet so much. I'm wondering what you think about, they think about. Do you see the same thing over there?
That's really, really interesting what you said, and about that there's more of a connection with Bangkok, with perhaps Malaysians. But when I'm in southern Thailand, one thing I do find is that ethnic Malay in southern Thailand have a very strong connection with Malaysia. They really aspire that their children will get an education here. They love to come to Malaysia. I really, really do feel that there is a much stronger connection with ethnic Malay in southern Thailand than perhaps Malay will have with ethnic Malay over there. For example, Najib sent a flotilla of aid and food to aid Rohingya in Burma, but not paying much attention to Melayu in southern Thailand. That's very interesting for me. Why that is, I don't know. Honestly, I don't have pieces of that puzzle. But as I said, I feel in southern Thailand, there's a very strong connection with.
Was pretty obvious actually. It's a political move.
Yes. But not to help Melayu in southern Thailand. And
But one thing I love going to that part of Thailand, like Patani and Narathiwat, you know, at least I can get around because there are many signages in Jauh.
yes.
It's a language that I can understand at least.
And many people speak Jawi. I can't. But I do see lots
Yeah,
of Jawi.
it's difficult, but somehow they
Yeah.
understand us.
And
If you're
also-
from Kelantan, then you're much better off.
And also I see a kind of, when it comes to Jawi, like a lot of youth in Patani and Narathiwat and Yala are embracing Jawi. You see it, there's a lot of sort of hipster cafes that have popped up and they're putting Jawi on their walls. I know a lot of young people that love to have Jawi on their t-shirts. You know, they have, this is Patani in Jawi or something. It's quite interesting that's kind of grabbing onto that identity, embracing that identity. I find that very interesting and fascinating.
You pointed it out correctly. Actually, it's an issue of identity more than anything else. I have to agree with you.
I do find that, yeah. And that means many different things.
Okay. Any more questions?
Mr. Richard, I am a Malaysian ethnic Chinese. Just now you mentioned about the Chinese going back to Saiburi, which is in which province, and they go back in which month of the year?
It is usually around February. And Saiburi town is in Narathiwat province. And there is a festival, and I mention it in my book, where they carry a goddess from the temple on their shoulders. And they light fireworks, and they throw the fireworks at each other, lots of drinking, and they carry the statue through the town into the sea. They dunk the statue 9 times in the sea, and they carry it back to the temple. Yeah, or it's the end of the new year, the Lunar New Year, the end of the first month of the Lunar New Year. And it's a good one. It's very interesting.
Okay. Question. You want to comment some more? Okay.
Of course.
I saw your picture just now, very interesting about the Tran Pran,
The what, sorry?
the Thai armies.
Okay, the Tahan Pran, yep,
Tahan
the militia,
Pran.
yep.
And they are recruited from which ethnic? Are they totally Malays or mixed group?
Mixed.
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 I mean, the percentage of the army?
I would say mostly Thai Buddhist.
Thai Buddhist.
And I think people's reasons for joining them are quite varied. I think some people just need a job. Very, very high unemployment. I also met some young people that joined because they wanted to have revenge.
How much they are paid? They are not regular army?
No, they're not regular army, but they're trained by regular army.
Then how long that they receive their training?
I think 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, yes.
That's
And they
good.
have a period of time where they'll do 2 months.
Within 8 weeks, they can handle this Kalashnikov.
They were given those after a few days.
Oh.
After a few days. Yeah. Yeah. And they get the uniform, they get an AK-47, they get live ammunition. I mean, the picture that I had early on, that was after a live fire training exercise. And I think that some of them had only been there 3 or 4 days when they're being trained at this sort of level. So it's very, very interesting with the Tahan Pran. Very, very, very interesting, yeah. So they're recruited locally. They also have women Tahan Pran called iron butterflies. That's the sort of direct Thai translation. And they're used for what the Thai government might sort of say softer duties. So if they need to search Muslim women at a checkpoint, they'll use the female Tahan Pran. They say that they don't have weapons, but I've seen them carrying weapons. There's a picture in my book, actually. The youth, you mean? Or? Yeah.
I went there, when I read the Jauh, I couldn't understand what they're talking about. The Jauh, they said, for example, I read cuti lah bom. The word cuti lah bom, I mean they translate it totally different from Google. And I think they got a translation from Google, which means stop.
From Google.
They said in Google, cuti lah bom, that means stop shooting. But they use the word very nice scripture, Jauh, cuti lah bom.
So you think they did a Google Translate? Printed it out? Did you see those?
There were some, yes, that I found difficult to understand.
Right.
Yeah, there was some. But the thing is that, you know, I've spoken to quite a fair few so-called academics. They feel that the presence of the military actually adds to the fire.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that that comment that you've just said, something that I've encountered a lot. You know,
And unfortunately, Bangkok is not listening.
not listening to it at all.
Yeah.
You know, they're not listening at all. And also now with Tahun Pran are very, very important now, because the Thai army for a long time has been looking for a way to ease up accountability on things. And the Tahun Pran have been proved to be very useful for that. Yeah, yeah. And I've even heard that. I think so, yes. It's probably a basic pay, which there, you know, in southern Thailand is a lot of money. So it's you know, for a young man, it's a good, and you get a gun, so. Yeah. And I'm very curious that, you know, with 65,000 men at arms, if there is to be a peace process, how are they going to get all these men to give up these weapons? This will be very interesting to see. Yeah. Yeah. And if you go to a village where there's been a shooting, you're staggered to see the number of men that are standing around with guns. You know, like guys in football uniforms, you know, really like heavily armed. And I asked my friend, who are these guys? You know, who are they? Don't know. You know?
What do you think about the process of escalation in Thai relations in the southern area, especially the Bali areas, especially in the area of Narathiwat, and Jauh?
Well, that's part of the problem in the south, is the idea of a centralization and what you can say, quote unquote, a Thai-ness. Because, you know, the Thai government wants everybody to have a Thai-ness. Should an ethnic Malay have to do a wa? That's not really something that's culturally relevant to an ethnic Malay there. So it's either left, or my experience has been that with Thai-ness and the implementation of Thai-ness and a centralization culture, it's either left or right. You're either with it or you're not. And it seems that in Thailand, if you're not, especially in the south, it's like an open rebellion almost. And that's very, very difficult for the Thai state to understand that there might be something different. There is something that's not culturally relevant to them. That doesn't mean that they can't be part of Thailand. They're just culturally different. To the older, yeah. I do agree with that, and I've never really met a normal person that is not happy to be part of the Thai state, that is not happy to be, you know, assimilated into that, but that they have to have their cultural identity recognized. And that's crucial. That's crucial. But the Thai state doesn't want to give an inch. Not an inch. So I think it's either going to stay the same. We're going to see a steady. I mean, I believe they've just in the last couple of weeks agreed to establish the safe zones, and they've got one now. They're going to have the first one in Rousseau, I think, and the BRN have just let off a massive car bomb. So we'll see. Do you think it'll stay the same, or I think it'll get much worse? That's my feeling.
We can have a few more questions. If you would like to ask Richard in BM, so you can do so. So maybe you want to test, Richard's BM, since he mentioned in the introductions that his BM he's fluent, right? Yeah. Yeah, just ask in BM.
Richard, what do you think of the Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka Thailand that have been set up by the government? Are they for just to get a political mileage or just for whatever?
I didn't hear the first part of your question.
Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka about Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka Thailand that
Okay.
have been set up in Narathiwat. what do you think are this setup of the Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka as the political mileage or simply to upgrade bahasa Melayu in Thailand?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's definitely political. I would think it's definitely political. But, you know, things change so quickly in southern Thailand that what can be something that can be implemented last year, it can change very, very quickly. And also the support for something can change very, very quickly. You know, so I think it's political.
Okay, thank you.